The invitation never came. I stood at the mailbox on a Tuesday morning in late October, my arthritic fingers flipping through the usual stack of grocery circulars and utility bills, and I felt it, the absence of something. The way you feel a missing tooth with your tongue before your brain even registers it's gone. Somewhere in my chest, a small door closed quietly, and I pretended not to notice. My name is Daniel Hartwell. I am 68 years old. I have one son, Marcus, who I raised alone after his mother left when he was 4. I have one grandson, Ethan, who I used to push on a tire swing in my backyard until my shoulders ached and my heart felt so full I thought it might split open like a ripe peach. And on the 14th of November, Ethan married a woman named Claire in a ceremony I was not invited to attend. Not forgotten, not overlooked, excluded. Let me tell you the shape of a thing before I tell you how it broke. Marcus and I were never the kind of father and son who talked easily. We loved each other the way men of our generation love, through presence, through action, through showing up. I drove 4 hours to watch him graduate college. I lent him money to start his landscaping business without ever asking for it back. When his marriage to Ethan's mother fell apart, I drove those same 4 hours and sat with him on his porch for 2 days without saying much of anything, because sometimes silence is the most useful thing a man can offer. But there was always something Marcus held slightly back from me, some private room in himself that he kept locked. I told myself it was just his nature. Some people are built that way. Ethan was different. Ethan had his mother's open heart and his grandfather's love of stories. He used to call me every Sunday when he was in college, and we'd talk for an hour about baseball and history and whatever book he was reading. He called me Pop Pop until he was 16, and even after he dropped the nickname, I could still hear it in the way he said Grandpa, with that extra breath, that extra warmth, like the word meant something to him. So when the 14th of November came and went, and I sat alone in my living room watching the evening news without a single photograph, without a phone call, without so much as a text message from either of them, I didn't feel anger at first. I felt confused. I called Marcus the next morning. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice slightly too measured, the way it gets when he's braced for something. "Dad," he said. "Marcus," I said back, and then I waited, because I've learned that silence draws more truth out of people than questions do. He exhaled slowly. "I know why you're calling." "Then you know what I'm going to ask." Another pause. I could hear his television in the background, some morning program with its cheerful artificial laugh track. "Ethan and Claire wanted a small ceremony," he finally said. "Very intimate, just immediate family. I didn't make the guest list, Dad. That was their decision." I sat with that for a moment. "I'm his grandfather," I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended, stripped down to something that surprised even me. "I know that. I raised you alone, Marcus. I pushed him on a swing in my backyard for 6 years. I drove to every single one of his baseball games until my knees gave out. Dad," his voice had gone tight. "I know all of this. I'm not the one who made this choice." And that was where he left it. I want to be honest with you about what followed, because it would be easy to paint myself as a saintly figure in this story, the wronged grandfather who handled everything with dignity and grace. That wouldn't be entirely true. For 3 weeks, I was miserable. I rattled around my house like a marble in a shoebox. I didn't sleep well. I picked up the phone to call Ethan a dozen times and put it down again because what would I say? Why didn't you want me there? I was afraid of the answer. I was more afraid that there wouldn't be one, that I'd get some polished, careful response that explained nothing and left me feeling smaller than before. My neighbor Ruthann, a retired school teacher who brings me tomatoes from her garden every summer, knocked on my door one evening and found me sitting in the dark. "Daniel Hartwell," she said, turning on my lamp without being invited. "You look like a man who's been swallowed." "I feel like one," I admitted. She sat down across from me in the armchair my late wife Patricia had loved, and folded her hands in her lap. "What are you going to do about it?" she asked. "What can I do? I can't uninvite myself to a wedding that already happened." "No," she said, "but you can decide what kind of man you want to be on the other side of it." I thought about that for a long time after she left. The call came on a Wednesday evening, 5 weeks after the wedding. I was in the kitchen making soup, one of those quiet, methodical tasks that keeps your hands busy while your mind wanders, when my phone buzzed on the counter. The name on the screen stopped me cold. "Ethan." I almost didn't answer, not out of spite, I want to be clear about that, but because I was suddenly, overwhelmingly frightened. I was 68 years old and I was frightened of talking to my own grandson. I picked up. Grandpa, his voice was different from what I expected. It wasn't the rehearsed, diplomatic voice of someone delivering a carefully prepared apology. It was raw, cracked around the edges like old wood in winter. "Ethan," I said. "I need to see you. Can I come this weekend?" "Of course you can," I said before I'd even thought about it. "You don't have to ask." He let out a breath. Okay, good, I'll be there Saturday morning." He arrived at 9 in the morning with dark circles under his eyes and his hair slightly too long, the way it gets when he's been too distracted to notice. He stood on my porch and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as desperate relief, like a man who's been treading water and finally sees something solid to grab onto. I held the door open and said, "Soup's warm, get in here." We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with his homework for years, the same table where I'd told him his grandmother was gone, and for a while neither of us spoke. We just ate. There's something to be said for the honesty of a shared meal. It says I'm not going anywhere. Take your time. Finally, he set down his spoon. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "You don't owe me anything," I said, "but I'd appreciate one." He looked at his hands. Claire's family, her parents, they've been going through something really serious. Her dad has early onset dementia. Her mother is barely holding herself together. Claire was devastated that her dad might not even recognize her at the wedding, and she wanted the ceremony to be as small and calm as possible. No extended family. No reception, just their immediate family and ours. 8 people total. He looked up at me then. "It was never about you, Grandpa. It was about her dad. She needed the day to be quiet. We needed to be able to fall apart a little without worrying about managing anyone else's feelings." I sat with that. "Your dad told me it was your decision," I said carefully. Something moved across Ethan's face. "Dad told you that?" "Yes." He pressed his lips together. That wasn't how it happened. Claire and I made the decision together. I asked Dad to explain it to you. I was a coward, Grandpa. I should have called you myself. His voice broke slightly on the last word. I kept telling myself I'd do it after the wedding, after things settled down. And then weeks went by and it got harder instead of easier, and he stopped, swallowed. "I'm sorry. I am so sorry." Here is the thing I didn't expect. I believed him. Not because the explanation was convenient, not because I wanted to forgive him and was looking for a reason. I believed him because I know my grandson. I know the particular way his voice sounds when he's telling the truth. Open, unguarded, slightly ashamed, versus the closed, careful way people sound when they're constructing something. "Tell me about Claire's father," I said. And something in Ethan's face collapsed with relief. He talked for an hour, about a man named Robert who had been an engineer, funny and meticulous, who had built birdhouses with Claire in his garage on weekends. About watching Robert struggle to find words at the wedding dinner, his eyes going sometimes distant and sometimes sharp with a grief that seemed to know exactly what was being lost. About Claire holding her father's hand during the ceremony and whispering the vows along with them so he could follow. I listened, I asked questions, I let him talk. By the time we'd moved from the kitchen to the living room, I'd begun to understand something. My pain and Claire's pain had been living in the same house without knowing it. Both of us had lost something we expected to have. Both of us were trying to protect something tender. The difference was that Claire's loss was permanent. Mine was just a wound. What happened next, and I say this carefully because I don't want to overstate it, was not dramatic. There were no grand gestures, no scene out of a movie. What happened next was simply this. I called my son. Marcus answered, and before he could settle into his careful, measured voice, I said, "I know you didn't handle this well, Marcus, but I also know you were trying to protect Ethan in your own way, and I want you to know I'm not angry." Silence on his end. "I need you to hear me," I continued. "I'm not angry, I'm hurt. Those are different things, and I'd like, if you're willing, to talk about the difference." Another silence. Then my son, my 51-year-old son, who never cried in front of me once that I could remember, not even when his mother left, not even when Patricia died, made a sound that I recognized, though I'd never heard it from him before. He was crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just quietly on the other end of the phone, in the particular way of a man who has been holding something for so long he can't quite remember when he picked it up. "I should have called you myself," he said. "When Ethan told me about Claire's dad, I thought I was doing you a favor, protecting you from feeling like a burden. I didn't." He stopped, started again. "I didn't think about what it would feel like from your side. I'm sorry, Dad." I had waited 68 years to hear my son cry. I had waited 68 years to hear him say, "I'm sorry, Dad with all the walls down. I sat in Patricia's chair and I pressed the phone against my ear and I let the moment be exactly what it was. Imperfect, overdue and true. Come for Christmas, I said. Both of you, bring Ethan and Claire, I'll make the roast. A broken laugh through the tears. Yeah, he said. Yeah, okay. I want to tell you about the Christmas dinner, because that is where the real ending lives, not in the phone calls, not in the reconciliations, but in the ordinary miracle of people around a table. Claire was quieter than I'd expected, thoughtful, with her mother's eyes and a dry sense of humor that surfaced slowly, like something that had learned to be careful about when it came out. Her father Robert had a good day, which Claire told me quietly in the kitchen was never guaranteed. He shook my hand firmly and said, "You must be Daniel. Ethan talks about you." He remembered me through the whole dinner, and Claire kept looking at him the way you look at something you're trying to memorize. At one point, I caught her watching her father laugh at one of Ethan's terrible jokes. The boy has always told terrible jokes, and her expression was so exposed, so helpless with love and grief and gratitude all at once, that I had to look away to give her the privacy of it. After dinner, when the dishes were done and Marcus and Ethan had migrated to the living room and Robert had dozed off gently in the armchair, Claire found me alone in the kitchen, drying a pot. "Ethan told me you weren't angry," she said. "He said you asked about my dad." "He told me what happened," I said. "I wanted to understand." She stood there for a moment, turning her wedding ring slowly on her finger, a habit I'd noticed that she didn't seem aware of. "I'm sorry you weren't there," she said finally. "Not because it would have changed anything, I think we needed it the way it was, but I'm sorry you didn't get to see it. Ethan cried, did you know that, when we exchanged rings? Big, ugly, completely undignified crying. A small smile. It was the best thing I've ever seen." I laughed, a real one, the kind that surprises you. "That boy cried at every single baseball movie we ever watched together," I said. I wasn't even a little surprised to hear that. She laughed too, and something eased between us, the last of the stiffness, the last of the careful politeness. "Welcome to the family," I said, officially, with roast and everything. She put her hand on my arm briefly, a light touch, just a moment, and said, "Thank you, Daniel. I am 68 years old. I have learned in the slow and humbling way that life teaches things, that love is almost never the problem. The problem is the gap between what we feel and what we manage to say. The problem is the phone call we keep meaning to make, the apology we keep meaning to deliver, the conversation we keep deferring, because it's easier to let things sit than to sit in things." I did not get to watch my grandson marry the woman he loves. I carry that, I won't pretend I don't. But I sat at a table with him on Christmas Day, and I watched him look at his wife, the way his grandfather used to look at his grandmother, and I thought, I know this boy. I helped make this man. He is good all the way through. And I got to meet Robert, who built birdhouses and had an engineer's precision, and who told me, over a second glass of wine, that his daughter had married a young man with an old soul. "He gets that from his grandfather," I said. Robert raised his glass, then here's to grandfathers. We clinked. Some things you don't get to keep, and some things come back to you changed, smaller in one way, larger in another, worn smooth by everything that happened between the losing and the finding. I'll take it. I'll take all of it.